All right, I just want to say before we continue on here, just in case maybe in the back of your head you're thinking, wow, Steve doesn't really trust us or thinks that all students are bad. That's definitely not true. And I think it would be awesome if everyone, like you, was here to learn, responsible and honest, and most of you are. But unfortunately, picky rules have to be made to deal with the exceptions. So a lot of what you're hearing in these welcome videos and the syllabus in general is my way of dealing with the exceptions. All right, let's start talking about things that are grade and grade related. Do not turn anything in more than a week early. So even if you have access to something in Canvas that you could get done earlier, don't turn it in more than a week early, because typically I'm going to give you feedback on the important things, and the feedback must be applied to future assignments. So please do not turn work in more than a week early. Most assignments receive instructor feedback. Not applying the feedback received to future assignments has a major impact on your grades. So just to clarify, when applicable, assignments get feedback. That feedback will either be inside the rubric or in the comments section, same place where you turn the grade. So as soon as you're notified that you received a grade, look at the grade, and you should either see comments right there or see a play button to play audio comments, or at a minimum see that there's a rubric and you click on the rubric, and when you open it up, if points were deducted, it will be explained in the rubric. Now if you get a perfect score, then obviously there's no reason to give feedback. All work that you turned in will be very clear where you turn it in. If it's an in-person class, most likely you'll hand it in person. But even then, there may be stuff that is turned in online, like in an online class, so it will be turned in through Canvas. I do not accept work via email unless a prior arrangement has been made. So let's say, for example, that you missed a couple weeks of class because of an automobile accident or something like that, then of course you're going to have to email it to me, because the time allotment for turning the work in will have closed in Canvas, which you'll learn a little bit more about. So this question here, the answer is email. Do not accept via email unless prior arrangements or I ask the entire class to submit a particular assignment via email. All right, so if you have your syllabus opened up, you may want to scroll back up till you get to this section dealing with grades. Now, grades are posted in Canvas. Over on the left here, you'll see a link that'll take you into grades. Your grades will appear there, not other people's grades, so you don't have to worry about people seeing your grades. But the grades are very accurate, what Canvas shows. And let me explain that. If you had only received, say, like a quiz so far in a class, and you look at your grade and it tells you you have a D so far in the class, you can't say, oh, well, that's not just because of that quiz. It's because I haven't turned in a project yet, or I haven't taken or turned in the final project yet, or whatever it is. No, when Canvas shows you what your grade is, it's what your grade would be if one were assigned right now. So at any time during the class, you see a grade that is less than what you're hoping or expecting to receive out of the class, then possibly a mistake was made, but more likely you need to change your work habits and bring up your grade in the class. Your entire grade for the class is broken down into 3 categories. And if you add these percentages up, they equal 100%. So meaning the entirety of your grade, 40% of it is based on projects that you do in the class. And a project, it'll be obvious when you're doing a project. It'll be that thing that is finished, that thing that if you were in class, in the classroom, you would hang up on the wall. If you're turning it in online, it would be that thing that most likely has a critique that goes along with it, that everyone gets a chance to see your project and people have a chance to comment on your project. Preparations include readings, writings, process checks, which we're going to talk a bit about in quizzes. So when we have a project that's due, like let's say in 4 weeks, chances are we'll have 1 or 2 or even 3 process checks on it. So we're preparing to make that project even better by you turning it in and me giving you feedback on it. And then your final project that you do in the class is worth 20% of your final grade. To make your grading a little bit easier to understand and easier to check it against what you see in Canvas, I grade out of these amount of points. So in other words, when you turn in a project, the maximum grade you could achieve would be 40 points on it. 36 to 40 points would be an A. We'll talk more about that later. Now, projects, a single project will be worth more than a single preparation just by the fact that there are a lot of these. You have at least like 1 or 2 every week in the preparation category, but you may only have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 projects due for the whole semester. And then the final project, even though it's only graded out of 20 points, is a way bigger deal because that only happens one time. So all 20 of those points, if you will, get applied to the final grade. And you're going to see an example in a little bit of how you could calculate these based on grades that you've received. Your grades will be updated regularly and privately posted for your viewing in Canvas. It's your responsibility to monitor your grades every week and let me know of any errors right away. Some grades are hard to prove, especially if you're in an in-person class and I go around and I do a process check. There won't be any paper trail on that. So you need to check your grades. If I accidentally put your process check grade into someone else, if you remind me right away, hey, there's something wrong with my grade here, no problem. We'll be able to figure it out. But if you wait too long, we may not be able to figure it out. And sometimes I get students that do just that. They'll miss a process check. They'll wait a few weeks till they think I forgot about it. And then they'll say, hey, I did this. Keep in mind what grades actually mean. A lot of times students think they're supposed to get an A just for showing up. But if you think about this, if you had a project that was due and it's posted online along with everyone else's, or it's up on the wall in the classroom, and we all look at all the projects together and yours isn't the best, but it's not in the category of the worst. It's right in between. That's supposed to be a C because that means average. Therefore, if you want to be, your work or your efforts must be above average and for an A superior. Now, truth be told that nowadays there's a thing called grade inflation where if your work truly isn't below average, and very importantly, you met all the objectives, all the instructions, like I said earlier, use the instructions as a checklist, make sure you don't miss anything, you're probably going to get a B for that type of work. So you don't have to worry that my grading is super strict, but it is probably stricter than what you might be used to from high school or other community college instructors. And then you might have a section here that includes additional information such as when to typically expect things will be due for your class. Now, an A is hard to get on a project. It really has to be portfolio or client ready and outstanding. The projects do have rubrics that point out all the criteria and what you need, and there's like point sections on them. But if you get a 36 out of 40 on a project, that's an A. That's a 90%. So that means that it is superior, in my opinion. So that's not the time to ask, why did I miss 4 points on this? You should be celebrating and saying, wow, for a real world project, I got an A. Now, if you're worried about your GPA, know this. An A in the class is very obtainable. Process checks, which you're going to hear about in more detail soon, are a great way to bring up your grades. To translate your grade from a number into a letter grade, you just simply take the number of points that you received and divide that number by the total possible points. So if you received a 35 on a process check or a project, because those are graded out of 40, you simply take 35, divide it by 40, and your calculator would tell you that that is an 87.5, which is a high B. What about late work? In short, but there are exceptions to this, if work is turned in late, you receive a full letter grade off of the grade within 1 week. After that week goes by, You'll receive 2-letter grades if you successfully turn it in, two-letter grade reduction, I should say. And then after 2 weeks of lateness, you are no longer allowed to turn that project in. Now, the exception to those deductions in the grade is if you have an excuse. And that can mean that you just go to student services on campus, go in and see them. It's part of your fees that you pay, and they give you an excuse. So-and-so was not feeling well on these days. Please excuse them from the work that was due during this time so that they can make it up at a later time. This does not include a simple doctor appointment. I don't make my appointments during class, so I expect you to not do that either. Question that comes up sometimes is, what if you just wake up and you're sick and it doesn't even make sense to go to the doctor or to the student health services? Well, that unfortunately falls under the life is not fair category. If you because you're sick, you miss a deadline turning the work in online or being able to turn it in person. It shouldn't be the end of the world for you, though. If you've been good on everything up till then, it should make a minute difference in your grade. And please only give me excused absences. So if your doctor excuses you from work that you turned in late, you just simply email it to me, get it turned in. When you do turn it in the comment sections, put a reminder in there that this is part of my excused work. Please do not email me with non-excused absence write-ups, like telling me all the bad things that are going on in your life or something like that. Again, if you need help, I'll help you find help. There's a lot of resources just right here in Canvas of where to find help. But you kind of have to put yourself in my shoes as someone who has to go by the syllabus. If it's not a doctor's excuse or something like serious and provable along those natures, it just falls under the life is not fair category. If you're turning work in person, it must be turned in at the very start of class. Otherwise, it would either fall into the category of being no longer 1 week late, now being 2 weeks late, or if it's 2 weeks late and you don't turn it in at the start of that class, then you won't be able to turn it in. Reason being, sometimes students show up and they start working on old work while we're going over new stuff, which is just not logical to the learning experience. And so how does a grade off per week late compute number-wise? Basically, if it's out of 40 points, it would be a 4-point reduction. And then in the second week, an 8-point reduction. If it's can't really turn the final project in late because it's due the last day of class. So very important to understand that after 2 weeks goes by, you can no longer turn the work in. And that's even would include spring break and a spring semester. That's a long time to be able to turn something in late. And if you're really not getting on it and turning it back in, you're just falling behind on everything. Please note that I do not approach you for late work. So if you're used to someone doing that in high school or other classes, I don't do it. I try to make this a very real world thing. If you're late with work to your client, you may get an angry phone call or so from them, but then they're going to fire you. Some assignments do receive more than a 1 grade reduction for being late, such as feedback process checks and certain file turn-ins. Which you'll learn more about in particular classes. But what would happen is you'd watch a video, and it's a very specific video on how to turn the file in. And if you don't take the time to watch the video and turn it in properly, you get a more severe grade reduction. But let's talk more about process checks and how they can affect your grade both positively and negatively. Process checks fall under the preparation category in your grades. There's 2 types of process checks. Just a regular process check and a process check that I put in parentheses in front of it, feedback process check. Let's talk about that one first. You can only get credit for a feedback process check if you actually apply the feedback to the project. Or if the project's not what's due next, then you would apply it to the next process check. So that means that if you're late with a process check this week, you can't next week turn in the process check and the project at the same time, because you'd be turning them in at the same time. You would not have had a chance to apply the feedback to the project. So what that means is if you're late with the process check, you're most likely going to have to be late with the next either process check or with the project itself. So it's kind of a bummer, but it's way better than getting a 0 for the process check. So that's the way I suggest you do it. It's better for your grade and it's better for your learning experience. And then there's just a regular process check that doesn't have feedback in parentheses in front of it. And those are just to keep you on track. So I might say, okay, submit the work to show me that you're 50% complete with it. If you do that, you get points for a process check. If you don't and you turn it in late, it doesn't make sense for me to give you a good grade on it, which only 4 points off is still a pretty good grade, because the whole purpose of those is to keep you motivated and on track to get the work done. So if you procrastinate for a week, the quality of your work on the project is going to suffer. So again, it's a motivational thing. So on a non-feedback process check, you get 2 grades off during the first week and then another grade reduction the second week. And just like everything else, once it's 2 weeks past due, you can no longer turn it in. One of the most important things we do in a creative class is critiques. So therefore, those kind of have a special category in the grades where if you're in an in-person class and you're at all late for the critique, that's an automatic grade reduction on the process. So I know this sounds like a lot of complication regarding the grades, but the main thing is show up, do the work, join in. You're going to get a good grade. You won't have to go keep watching this video or the end part of this video on how to compute your grades. Extra credit. Officially, there is none, but you'll see there's kind of a workaround on it. But I think that all giving extra credit does in a class is allows people to procrastinate and then at the end ask the instructor, do you have extra credit to try to bring my grade up? The instructor gives them something that barely even applies to the class, definitely doesn't meet the criteria that was specified for the class in the beginning, and then the student gets by with like a C grade when they really didn't learn what they were supposed to learn in the class. Now, here is how to bring up your grade in my class. Do more than the minimum on process checks. So earlier you heard me talk about project grades and how real world they are. On a process check, here I give you a way to boost your grades. So typically on a process check, I'll say, do this. I'll just give you an example here. Maybe I say, bring in 3 examples of what you want to do for the project. And if you do exactly the minimum required, 3, in this example, you'll still get a 36 out of 40 for the grade, which if you divide that up, that's a 90%, that's an A. So you get an A for doing the minimum requirement. But if you do more, you could get a 37 out of 40 or a 38, or if you really make a great effort on this process check, you could get a 40 out of 40. Now, the reason that that's extra is all you need at this college to get an A is a 90%. So anything above a 90% builds your grade up. Or I should say anything above a 90% on a particular assignment builds your grade up. So if you're in the B category and you start packing on 40 after 40 out of 40 points in process checks, you're going to see your grade start to move upward. And one important distinction for me to make here is even though you may be doing more than what's required along the way, when it comes time to turning in the final project, do not turn in more than one without either prior instruction or prior commitment from me to accept more than one project, or at a minimum, if you're turning it in online, in the comments section, write in there, the project I would like you to grade is, and specify which project it is, and then you can say, but I'm also turning in a second one because I thought it was good, or I really wanted the challenge of doing 2 of these or 3 of these. This is the letter grade breakdown, and notice there's a full 10 percentage point swing between grades. So therefore, I do not round up grades. It's just simply unfair to the student who all semester long was sitting there at a 98% average, and then someone that's at an 88, which is 10 points different, they should not get the same grade. They should not be rounded up to an A. So because you have access to your grades all semester long, please do not be that person that emails me and gives me that sob story of how great it would be if you got an A in the class. because you're applying to a four-year university. I'll just simply remind you of this video. This is another important concept to understand. Sometimes students incorrectly think that if they are falling behind on an assignment, it's better to just forget it and move on to the next one. Here is the math to prove how wrong that is. So let's say you had 2 projects so far and you received a 36 out of 40 on the first one. You forgot project 2 when it was due. Your dog ate it right before the following class, and you think you'll just forget about it and make a massive, awesome effort on project 3. Let's say that you do that on project 3 and you get a 40 out of 40 on it. So if you take your first grade of 36, add to that 0 for the second one that you decided, and then 40, which you did great on the other one, you get a 76. You divide that by 3, which equals a 25.3 out of 40, which is a 63% or a failing grade so far on your projects. Now, even if you turn project 2 in late with a failing grade, let's say you only get 20 out of 20 points, and instead of an A+ on project 3, you just get the low A, 36 out of 40. So now instead we're adding 36, but instead 0 is the next grade. We have 20. Instead of 40 on the next one, we have 36, but that adds up to 92 divided by 3 equals a 30.7 out of 40, which is a 77%, which is also a high C. Even though Canvas calculates your grades for you, I'm going to show you how you could do it manually. You may not be interested in this right now, so if you don't want to watch past this point in the video, that's completely understandable, and then you know where it is if you do want to come back and see it. So if you want to calculate your grade, what you do is you add up all of the project grades that you received and divide them by the number of projects. This number will be between 0 and 40 and is your total for the project section. So in other words, if we look over here, you would put that number here for projects. Then you would do the same thing. You would add up all of the preparation grades that you got, divide them by the number of preparations, put that number here, and then you would take either what you got for the final project or what you're anticipating you'll get for the final project, add all those up, and that will give you your grade out of 100 for the class. So let's look at an example here. So let's say that 3 projects are done so far. You got a 35, a 32, and a 36 out of them. That totals up 103 divided by 3. That equals 33.3. 6 preparations due so far. These are the grades you received, which add up to 180. You divide it by the total number of the 6 preparations, and you get 30 points. Let's say you have not done the final project yet, but you think, okay, I'm really going for it. I think I'm going to get a 90 out of it, which 90% of 20 or 0.90 times 20 equals 18. And then you put these on top of each other, like over here. You add them up, 33.3 plus 30 plus 18, and you get 81.3 out of 100. So this is a low B. It's early in the class at this point, let's say, because only 3 projects, 6 preps have been done. So you know that you could recover from that if you're trying for an A. Now, it's interesting to note that sometimes people think, oh, the final is 20% of my grade, so all I got to do is get an A on that. Well, no, it's only 20%. So in this example, if you change these numbers out and make this a 20, it only brings your grade up to 83.3. So it's another great lesson about not procrastinating. Keep your grade where you want it all semester long.